Yes, welcome along to the Bhoycie Bus. The Monday Club is back. Slight substitution in terms of who is on with me, but we've managed to replace Russell with the experienced head. He's growing out the grey beard. He's becoming the second wise man of the bus. I know you reserved that name for Liam Greenlaw on the Friday Feeling, Phil, but you're beginning to grow that beard out and become the second coming of Liam, I think. How are you doing, mate?
I'm doing good, mate. A fantastic weekend, to say the least. I think I'm confident in saying that everyone had a very good weekend. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about this tonight. Yes, it was an eventful one, to say the least.
Oh, it certainly was. I mean, I don't think we could have written a better story than what transpired over the weekend. It was one of those truly, if Carlsberg did Scottish football to a T for a Celtic fan, that was what we were treated to at the weekend there. It couldn't have went any better. And we will get into all of the fallout, and I believe there's been plenty of it tonight, even on the old radio phone-ins from what we're seeing in the comments. But before we get into all that, we'll do the housekeeping, we'll do all that good stuff. So if you can give the show a wee like, helps just get the numbers up there. If you could share it, that would be even better for us. You can slag our hair, maybe not Phil's new look beard, looking pretty good, but on the money now. We don't need any jip for that coming in whatsoever. You can become a Bhoycie Bus member, and then there is also the option there of heading along to piesports.com to get yourself a tasty discount at the checkout there using the code BUS1888. Right, Phil, that's all of that kind of taken care of. We're now in a position where we can have a lot of fun, I think, tonight with how the football transpired over the weekend. We went from a situation where Rangers were feeling as if they were moral winners only a week ago after getting that famous 3-3 victory at Ibrox to becoming complete losers. It turns out in Dingwall, when they are unable to follow up getting that late draw against us, and they've handed the initiative so beautifully back to Celtic at the same time. But before we go into Rangers, we'll recap, obviously, over the Celtic game. I know you'll have been at it at Celtic Park. And if we rewind right back to the start of the weekend, I would imagine at half-time at Celtic Park, you probably couldn't have seen a weekend transpiring the way it did in the end, because if we're looking at those first 45 minutes for Celtic, it looked as if there was going to be one team dropping points. It might well have been us, didn't it?
It certainly did. It was a bit of a mystifying performance on Saturday, because the first half, and it's something that we've seen before from Celtic this season. A team comes with a low block, has absolutely no intention of playing football from the first couple of minutes. St Mirren were time wasting, doing all sorts, getting away with it as well. Referee not giving them any sort of warning. Just a frustrating day. It looked like we weren't even showing any initiative. But we were always in control of the game. It was never like St Mirren were hitting us on the break and getting a wee chance here and there. You always felt like if we just go up a gear, just one gear, if we get a goal, their whole plan falls apart and we'll go on and win this. And that's exactly what happened. What a finish by Reo Hatate, just basically dinking it with the outside of his right foot. I believe in the world of FIFA, it's called a Trivela shot. That's what I'm told the fancy word for it is. You've got Panenka penalties. Apparently, that's a Trivela, is the outside of the foot shot. Brilliant finish. And after that, surprise, surprise, the floodgates opened because St Mirren's game plan was out the window. And in the end, really good day at the office, essentially. And 3 points, obviously, on the board was the most important thing. And it set us up nicely for what was to come later in the weekend.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's interesting you mentioned Reo Hatate, because I've been pointing out for a few weeks now with Celtic that when this league title race has been getting close, I felt the decisive factors were going to be whether or not we can get our key players back fit if we're just focusing on ourselves to begin with. And that was Cameron Carter-Vickers for me. I always felt if CCV got himself back up to full fitness, that would be massive for us. And I was on the record as saying I felt we would end up winning this league title if Carter-Vickers plays most of the games. He's that important to us. But I think in a lot of ways, a guy like Reo Hatate has almost slipped under the radar a bit this season because he has had such a stop-start year in terms of injuries. He's not really been able to hit anywhere close to the heights we've seen him in, under Ange Postecoglou in previous seasons. And I think there was a lot of question marks at the start of the season whether his head was actually really still at Celtic. But I think what we are beginning to find out now is when the key games come along, somebody like a Reo Hatate to unlock these defences, which, as you say, is something Celtic sorely lack, is that little bit of quality sometimes in the final third when the defenders do sit in deep and do make it difficult for us to break through. We tend to resort to type and go sideways passing, hope for a wee break, and put the ball in. Kyogo's playing up front, the balls are going over his head most of the time, and you are relying on a little bit of creativity that has been missing for large spells in this season. And when you've got a guy like Reo Hatate coming back in now for the remainder of the season, you have now got that bit more confidence in there that he is the type of guy that could be crucial in terms of getting us the goals that get us over the line, whether he's scoring them or whether he's playing the passes that, break through those low blocks and that, most Scottish teams play against us with. For you, Phil, with seeing Hatate now back in the team, how important is it that he stays fit? Is he as important now almost as Cameron Carter-Vickers in this run? And if, again, forgetting about Rangers for the time being, we're looking at it, we've got to win, 4 of the next 5. We can afford 1 draw with how the weekend's transpired. How integral is Reo Hatate going to be over those games if we're to get over the line?
He is so vital. And the thing was, before he came back, I was a bit worried because rightfully, as you say, his form before he got injured, when we had that strange moment at the start of the season where it seemed like him and Brendan just weren't on the same page. He wasn't getting games because David Turnbull was starting. There was a whole contract standoff. Eventually, when he did get games, he got injured, came back, got injured again. And the build-up to Hatate's return, I know he's obviously proved it in the past how good he can be, but looking at how it had been under Brendan and the few times he played, you're like, I don't know, I'm worried with him coming back. Is he really going to hit the heights? Because there was a lot of people were basically pinning all their hopes on it, but I am very pleased to say that he's been unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable since he's came in the last few games. I was really worried about him coming back in against Livingston, especially with that plastic pitch. Not a place that you want to play a player that's got niggling injuries, as we saw with when Siminovic played for us. He never played on a plastic pitch. So you're like, oh God, what a game to come back into against a team of hammer throws. He cruised through that game. He looked fantastic. I thought he was great at Ibrox last week. And yeah, he was imperative at the weekend there because these games coming up for the last 5, again, we're going to get teams. We're going to play St Mirren again. We're going to play Kilmarnock. These are teams that are just going to look to sit deep and hit us on the counter-attack. So guys like him being available are going to be so crucial because he's got that bit of magic in him. And yeah, what a time to be getting him back. And you're right to put him alongside Carter-Vickers right now. It's so imperative. But I guess we've got to consider that as well, that there's been times this season where we can rightfully criticise the style of play, the football, but there's also been an argument to say that we haven't had all these players available on the regular on a consistent basis. So if we can get these guys back now at the most crucial time of the season, then it definitely bodes well for these last, 5 games now to go, 5 league games, and still at the Scottish Cup semi. So yeah, it couldn't be timed any better right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I do think when you're looking at it, the part of the reason, and I know there's a lot of other factors that have played its role this season as to why it's been a bit stop-start and why we've all been kind of wondering what's not necessarily going correct at Celtic, but it's been, massive not having players like Reo Hatate and Cameron Carter-Vickers available for large spells in this season. For me, they're worth probably at least in our 5 or 6 points on our board, if they'd stayed fit throughout the whole season to me. And I think this title race would have been done and dusted already if they two hadn't got injured, despite all the other problems that we've faced, both, on the playing field, with the manager's selections at times, with his tactics, and all the way up to boardroom level, as we've discussed numerous occasions. And that's how big a factor, though, I think those two players could have been, that they could have totally removed a lot of those other factors and a lot of that background noise from the equation, because I just think Celtic would have kept winning with them there. I think when we're also looking at the game at the weekend, there's another interesting point, I think, to take away from it. Both strikers, Phil, on the score sheet, which again bodes well, I think, for the run-in. If we're going to have 2 fit and firing strikers there, Kyogo's been a bit off the boil, to say the least, this season. I think somebody like Maeda coming in has done really well. He took his goal really well at Ibrox last week. He's followed that up then, with a good poacher's goal, at the weekend there. And he's got a really good return since he's came in. But I also think part of having Maeda there that's been so important is now pushing Kyogo to up his game a little bit. And that goal that Kyogo gets at the weekend is a lot more similar to the type of goals he's been scoring year after year, where he's making those runs and getting on the end of things and just getting himself into those sort of positions where he's a real pest for defences. And, I think if we've got Kyogo firing and we've got Ida there to push him, and Ida is another option off the bench, it does point towards the fact that was a bit of decent recruitment in, January. I know January could have been done better, but when you're looking at it now, it obviously shows that O isn't really up to standard, and that we almost needed that striker there. And it's almost, for me, Phil, as if when I look at somebody like Ida now, whilst he has managed to get his fair share of goals, I think he's now also beginning to push Kyogo. And I'll be really interested to see how he decides to play this over the next few weeks now, because I feel he's got two very strong options that he could rotate between up front. And when you're looking at it from that point of view, how important is it for Celtic now that they have that sort of variety up front? Because for, certainly the first half of the season, it did feel like we were Kyogo or bust at times, didn't it?
Without a doubt, you're pinning all your hopes on him. And remember, at the very start of the season, Brendan talked about Kyogo's got pending shoulder surgery. Remember, that was a thing that he pointed out, where he's like, it's up to the player. It's the player's discretion when he wants to go and get it done, but that's always hanging over him. So, yeah, there's always that worry, and, opposition players might target him and so on. But with the way things are going to go in the last 5 games, not every game is going to play out the same way. So it is so important to have that variety. And the two of them are completely polar opposites, but bring, a goal threat and in different ways. And that thing's happening again, though, John. They always talk about it. Don't fall in love with a player on loan. But I think Ida, I'm included in this, and I think many fans are starting to go that way. I want to sign him full time now, but there's no option to buy. We were told that there was no out and out option, so that's up in the air. But I'm at that stage now where I'm like, get this guy full time in the summer, whatever it costs. For me, yeah, you're right to say that O's definitely out of the reckoning. I think O is his race, his run. But I think he does done enough so far to show that, if he comes to us full time and becomes settled essentially now that he's got a new, because he's fell out the reckoning at Norwich. He was third choice striker there. So, and he's obviously got the fans on side up here. A lot of people starting to warm to him after a rocky start. Not his fault. He obviously came in, and the conditions he was signed, he became like the scapegoat, like the fall guy for everything that was wrong with that transfer window. A lot of anger vented towards him. But yeah, I'm firmly on board. I'm on the Ida bus essentially about getting him full time, because I think he's got something to him there. I thought his goal last week at Ibrox, the strength that he showed to hold it up and finish it the way he did. It's just really unlucky that he's not got that on his CV now, a winning goal at Ibrox. But as it turns out now, at the time it did feel like a bit of a gutter, a bit of a kick in the gut to lose that. Or not lose it, we did lose according to Colin. To lose the late goal though, in the end that point could now be massively crucial when you look at it, when you actually think about it. So maybe it wasn't all that bad that he didn't get the winning goal in the end, and it was only a draw. But for me, I think he's quality. I think he's bringing a lot to the team in this second half of the season. Yeah, I would definitely be looking to get him full time in the summer.
I think it's an interesting one with Ida, because I think there is certainly going to be interest in him, and I think Norwich are looking to sell. I know we don't have the first option, which I feel that's always silly when you're doing a loan in any event, that you should always have that option there just in case you want to trigger it. And I think that was a little bit negligent on Celtic's part not to have put some of that sort of clause in, because I feel that's something Norwich would have agreed to. Looking at the rumours, I think you're looking probably upwards of 6 million from what we're seeing, of course, and whether Celtic will be willing to spend that money or not. But it doesn't seem an awful lot to me for a player that's going to be guaranteeing you goals, certainly at domestic level as a minimum. He's still young as well. He's got the best years are comfortably in front of him. So he's somebody that you could either develop and see, the absolute best of him at Celtic, in a few years' time if Celtic did pull that trigger and buy him. Or even if, they decide after a couple of years that he wants to try something new, he's somebody you can get a big return on. If he has a couple of years on here, you're mentioning he could have got the winning goal at Ibrox. He's to sign up permanently, then I've no doubt that he could end up with some very important goals in these derby fixtures to come. He might end up being a decisive factor in the one at Celtic Park in a couple of weeks' time. I don't think anyone would bet against him being a decisive player in that particular fixture. So there is a lot of positivity there when it comes to the strikers, and there is, as you rightly point out, a lot more variety in how we can actually go about hurting teams, which I think definitely gives us something different when he does in the team. It's he has got that bit more of a physical presence. he does allow us to put more balls into the box and try and win the aerial battles. And hold-up plays are actually extremely good, as well, at bringing the other players in those games like Ibrox when you're trying to get up the park. So, I think he certainly ticks a lot of boxes. I would be surprised if it's not someone Brendan wants to bring in on a regular basis. But it's absolutely something I would imagine we'll be looking at there. Obviously, get the win. So we move on to Sunday. Yeah. We are probably expecting Rangers to win. They are playing, a team that they've never lost to in their history. Both Old Co and New Co, or whatever you want to call Rangers. Ross County have never managed to beat any version of the club playing out of Ibrox. And then you look at it and they get themselves in front early, Rangers as well. You're thinking this will probably end up being one of those days. I didn't actually catch much of the game. I'd seen my phone going off constantly in the second half, and I would never have expected Ross County to have pulled off a win there. I thought if they can manage to draw, that'd be brilliant. But what we are beginning to see there is Celtic had the opportunity to go first this weekend. Celtic managed to put the pressure on by extending that lead in the league table. Rangers are now in a position where they go into Sunday knowing what they need to do to get back to top of the table. They have to beat Ross County and beat Dundee. 2 wins takes them back top, coming into Celtic Park potentially in the next league fixture after that. And what happens is they completely crumble under the pressure, and they completely capitulate. They, show that they are a little bit gutless, and that they do have a little bit of fear still about these games. They still suffer a bit of PTSD when it comes towards the end of the season, and they know what usually happens at this time of year, and that Celtic start racking up the wins and start racking their way towards league championships and potentially Scottish Cups. And I think the pressure ended up getting to Rangers in a game that we probably didn't expect it to get to them in when they're playing a club that is struggling to stay in the top flight at the moment in Ross County. But when you look at that, Phil, how much of a boost is that for Celtic? Rangers ending up dropping those points? I think what they'll try and say, and they'll caveat it, because Rangers are obviously going to turn around and say it's still in their hands, and they're absolutely right. Yeah, it's still in their hands in terms of what's shifted in the grand scheme of things is they now need to come to Celtic Park and win. Yeah. They now need to win all 6, whereas we can get 5 in a draw. But psychologically, is this the start of their season beginning to unravel, do you think? And how do you see this playing out over the next few games? Do you think those scars are going to be visible, and that presents an opportunity for us when they come to Celtic Park to really put them to the sword now?
But, well, my feelings since the January window have been that ultimately we'll go on and win the title, but it's going to be a lot closer than what it should have been. And it's still playing out that way. And I still feel, especially now after what's happened this weekend, that, yeah, we will get there. By hook or by crook, we'll find a way. The next 5 games, we just do whatever we can to win those games. Whatever it takes, Brendan, whatever you need to change, if you need to change anything, just make sure we get it done. That gave result yesterday. So yesterday, before the game, before the weekend there, obviously it was a case of we knew we win the 6 games, which would include a win over Rangers at Searles. But I did say on Friday night before when myself, Liam and Michael were on, I said that obviously it'd be ideal if somebody could just step up and just do us a wee favour, just give us that little cushion. And I did, like many, didn't see it coming from Ross County, just like the Motherwell game a few weeks back, where I didn't see that coming. But of course, the difference there was they played first and then we didn't capitalise on it. Now the roles are reversed. Well, we've obviously won our game and they have won it. Now we just need to keep it going. We have now, if you think you like the trophy before the weekend there, if you look at the trophy, they had a Celtic hand on one handle and a Rangers hand on the other. It's now a case we've got a hand on one of them firmly and a couple of fingers on the other handle. We're starting to get a wee bit of grip. It's not totally there yet. Rangers have still, as you say, they know themselves. If they want to win all the remaining games, then yeah, rightfully so, they are still in the hunt. But my God, it does change it massively from the point of view of the Celtic Park fixture. After that draw last week, what was going through my head was, well, they now know that they can come to Celtic Park, they can stodge it up, frustrate us, get everything going their way with referee decisions, stopping the play, come away with a crappy 0-0 draw. That probably would have been their strategy coming to Celtic Park in a few weeks. But now, of course, it's all flipped. So they have to come and try and beat us. So they'll have to play a very open style. And I think that benefits us massively. Also, the fact that in the whole dynamic that we've had in the last couple of years with the away fans being reduced and in some cases no away fans, Celtic have shown that they cope better without having a fan presence there, because we've got a better record at Ibrox in this whole no away fan thing than they've got at Celtic Park. So when they come to Celtic Park, when these fixtures get announced, it's going to be a cauldron. Obviously, there was that game. It was the blueprint from 2022, the one that did the dream scenario where as soon as Rangers walked out in that park tonight against us, they were beat. The atmosphere was intense. Maybe we'd been under the lights that night. Maybe that added to it. But I still think during the day we can still create such a loud and intimidating atmosphere. It needs to be like that when they come to town. We need to create that again, because they have shown that they do not like it. The pressure gets to them. Tavernier, Goldson, they're getting sounded out by all sorts of Rangers fans on social media. You know, they go through a weird love-hate relationship with they two in particular, where, you know, 1 minute they're a hero. I mean, see if Tavernier was to score a penalty on Wednesday night against Dundee, which probably could happen, he'll be a hero again in many of the eyes, but right now he's captain loser, serial loser. But he's shown over the years, him and Goldson in particular, they don't like all this. Guys like Barisic are all still in that squad. We need to just put the pressure on them then that fixture comes around, because I think they will crumble when it's on there. So it's so crucial that we create such an intimidating atmosphere when they come to play us.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when we look at the game at Celtic Park now, it's absolutely pivotal that we approach that correctly, because for me, that is the opportunity, because my gut tells me that will be the next league game that Celtic play, will be against Rangers at Celtic Park. I think it will be the first one after the split, just so they avoid any potential shenanigans later on in the split fixtures. But when you're looking at that, if that is to be the case, it's certainly be one of the first two games. If Celtic are able to open up a 4-point gap by winning that game, which is absolutely no doubt in my mind, that's how Brendan will approach it. I don't think his strategy going into this game changed. I think you're right to point out Rangers' strategy has changed going into this game. I don't think Celtic's strategy changes going into this game at all. I think just because they've got the cushion now where they could get away with a draw essentially and still win the league title, I don't see Brendan doing that. I think he will most likely be looking for a very big statement win if he can manage it against Rangers. And, you know, fair enough, if it ends up finishing a draw, it finishes a draw, but I don't think that'll be anything Celtic go out of their way to look for. And when you look at Rangers themselves now, I think it's two wins in their last 7. I think I read somewhere, albeit I know there's a couple of games against Benfica chucked into the stat pad that, if you like, a little bit. But the form isn't that good, and it's not really been talked about much in the press until now. You know, certainly going into the game at Ibrox, there was no mention of the fact that Rangers had shown a couple of frailties in recent weeks. It was all about Celtic and what was going to happen to them at Ibrox. We have now just seen the frailties in full show. I think Celtic were very unfortunate not to win the game at Ibrox through a combination of factors, and in a lot of ways they actually shot themselves in the foot with some of their own decision making, Celtic. But that wasn't how that game was supposed to play out in the eyes of the media. That was supposed to be a resounding Rangers win in their march towards the title. That was how the story was written. As Brendan always says, we write our own stories, and how the story is now playing out is very similar to a story we've seen many a times, and it's one of our favourite films to watch when it gets a wee bit close, and that is when the pressure really comes onto that team in Govan. They do not know how to respond to the pressure, and they were looking like they could for a while this year. They've been hanging in there. However, they now have to go potentially Dundee on Wednesday night. It could be Perth, as was announced today. If it's Dundee, which I think most Celtic fans will want it, at Dens Park on the potato patch, that's likely going to be. And, you know, Rangers are then under huge pressure there, Phil. I'll go as far as to say, if they do not beat Dundee at Dens Park, their season is finished in terms of the league. I cannot see Celtic throwing away a 4-point lead, even if Rangers manage to somehow come to Celtic Park and do the unthinkable. I still think we'd get over the line in that sort of situation. It does feel as if the wheels might be coming off the bus when you're looking at a game like Dundee, especially with all of the sort of chat around the game with the pitch and it being postponed now on multiple occasions, and It's almost became a bit of a saga with the Rangers putting out statements demanding punishments. I know we talk about Dundee don't necessarily have a lot to play for in terms of league positions. They've secured top 6 football. I just wonder, I think Dundee might just want to get one over Rangers quite badly, given how things have developed over the past few weeks and how Rangers have handled the fact they haven't been able to play this game yet. And granted, Dundee's pitch isn't very good, but you know, the way Rangers have been going at it, I think they've added a lot more fire to this fuel. And, you know, I think there's going to be a situation there where there is potential for drop points. How do you see it going on Wednesday night, given their frailties at the weekend being on full effect, and now they are into a situation where they cannot afford one more slip? Does this actually benefit Celtic now, this Dundee game coming in this midweek?
Yeah, it definitely does. Funny enough, a few weeks back, me and Russell did a show on a Tuesday. Around at the time it got cancelled for the first time. It's mad that I'm saying the first time. How many times has been cancelled now? 3 times. But I think it was the first time around, and I think Russell posed the question at the time, could this be one of these weird little moments we look back on in the season? And yeah, when you thought about it, I think the comparison I drew was in 2011, we lost the league from a rearranged game against Inverness, where we were in the position to go and win the title. And then we had a game against Inverness, which was put after the post-split because the way the table had worked out, they were in the bottom half. They couldn't get in the top half. So it was kind of like a game that didn't really affect the overall table in terms of where they could be. So they put it back. But it was one of these ones where you went up there, you thought, they've got nothing to play for. They're safe anyway. They're in the bottom half. What could possibly go wrong? And of course, it's those types of games that can catch you out. And the thing that's going to be a problem for them is their fans are going to be right on top of them from the first minute. If they go in at halftime, like we did at the weekend there, 0-0 at halftime, being frustrated, a team that's not really looking to play any football by a low block, they're going to be right on top of them. So from our point of view, this is actually working really, really well for us. This could be a sticky fixture for them. I hope it does go ahead at Dens Park, because you're right, the pitch, even if it is playable in the end, it's taken a hell of a beating in the last few weeks. It's going to be in a bit of a state. So that's going to, again, benefit. But Rangers, in terms of being a football team compared to us, they're not really, let's be honest. They will happily do long balls and whatnot. You know, they don't rely on what we do, passing a lot along the ground, sideways passing and so on. So will that be an effect? Who knows? But I think it's a mental thing more than, I say, their crowd are going to be right on them, making sure that, you know, if it's 0-0, half time gets to an hour, still nothing each, and heaven forbid if they happen to lose a goal and go behind in the game, oh boy, they'll certainly feel it then. But it could end up being, like I said, one of these things we look back at the end of this season, once it's all said and done, and go, that Dundee game getting rearranged multiple times was one of the crucial moments. Because at the time, you kind of think, whatever, they'll win it whenever they play it. But the way things have transpired, and you're right about the narrative that's been put out, the things that they've said in their statements, the way they've tried to sort of pressure the SFA and punishing Dundee and whatnot, and the things they've said, Dundee might just say, they're just going to improve a point. They've got to play them twice now as well. And these are post-split fixtures now. They've got to play them as rearranged game and play them again. So who knows? Maybe there'll be even more bad blood in the air when they play for the second time. But it could be one of these weird wee instances where we go, man, it seemed at the time a bit irrelevant, but it's turned out to be quite crucial in the end.
I think when you're looking at it as well, the dynamics of how this season is played out has benefited us massively, regardless of whether they win or not midweek, because of the fact that games was postponed so many times. It's actually stopped Rangers from having that psychological advantage of actually being able to be top of the table if they had indeed gone on to win that fixture, because it's something we always go back to. Points on the board are always better than games in hand, and we always bang that drum, regardless of who has the games in hand and who has the points on the board. I think every single member on our pod anyway would far rather have those points on the board. And Celtic were in the fortunate position where they had that situation there. And I think psychologically from Rangers, it almost feels as if every time they're getting that bit closer to Celtic, something ends up happening that pushes it back. And this was one such, well, it's a brilliant example because of the fact if this game had been played at the first game of Askin and Rangers had been able to win it, they would have actually been top of the table for large spells over the past month or so. You know, it had been Celtic that would have had, you know, having to chase Rangers down. But as it is, perversely, even though Rangers might have thought this is a banker win, the league table is showing otherwise. It was showing Celtic were still the team at the top, and it was showing a bit more of a healthier gap at times, like it is at the moment, where it's sitting at 4 points, and they now know if they don't manage to win this game in hand, they are in serious bother, because even a draw, Celtic have a superior goal difference than them as well. So they don't manage to beat Dundee midweek, and they are in serious bother, because then it is absolutely do or die at Celtic Park. There is potential they could get away with a draw at Celtic, and Celtic could chuck it somewhere else.
Yeah.
If you have the additional points tally in your favour, if they drop any more than Celtic, I can't see letting them back in whatsoever. So I think that is going to be absolutely crucial when we're looking at that. Also, when we're looking at the Dundee game, it's been interesting. Scottish Premiership obviously been out, and they've now confirmed fixtures will not be announced until the Dundee game, which I was a little bit surprised at, to be honest with you, Phil, and I'll tell you why. I think you're looking at this, the game's coming up. I know it's the Scottish Cup weekend this weekend, so they do have a little bit of leeway there. But in terms of getting tickets and everything sold for all the clubs across all the fixtures that have to be played post-split, surely it's in the league's best interest to have that announced early, to give the clubs the best possible chance of selling their match day tickets and knowing when they're going to have their home games for the remainder of the season, rather than deciding, let's wait until Thursday, until the Rangers game's been played, and we know exactly what the state of play is at the top of the table, because that is exactly what they are doing by waiting. There's no other reason for it. It must be to do with the fact they don't know where to put the last derby of the season. How surprised were you they've decided to wait until this time? And, in terms of the actual fixtures, looking ahead there, how significant is it going to be with the fact that Celtic now have, absolutely without a doubt, regardless of when these come out, they're going to have predominantly home fixtures left, and Rangers are predominantly going to have away ones to play?
Yeah, I believe the split's going to work, that we'll have 3 home, 2 away, and they'll be the opposite. And also we need to play them at Celtic Park. But yeah, that's what works out at 19 and 19. The result of that is, and somebody said earlier on in the chat, and I totally agree, the split with Ali's put here, it is total BS. It's nonsense. It needs to go. But sadly, it's been in play now, since 2001, I think it is. And what you're going to get now as a result of this, to allow, because the SPFL are going to have to bend to Celtic and Rangers win, because they're the ones fighting for the title. It's a big prize. So a team like either Dundee, Kilmarnock or St Mirren are going to have to come to Celtic Park for a third time, which, from our point of view, it gets us 19 home and 19 away. But from their point of view, they don't get 19 home and 19 away. They're just basically like collateral in all this in the title fight. And that's why the split's nonsense. But this is what it is what it is. We just need to get on with it, sadly. We will get 3 home, 2 away. It'll be Rangers. I think we'll get Hearts at home, and I think they'll probably pick Dundee to be the team that comes for us, which might be a good thing, because Dundee might be rained off if we had to play them at Dens Park, so it's probably a good thing that they come to us. Kilmarnock away is obviously the one that I think many fans are looking at, like, that's the sticky one, but you'd like to think now with what's on the line, Jono, team talks and that should be irrelevant at this stage for the team. They look at it and go, we know what we need to do now. So when they go down to play Kilmarnock again, it should be a case of, right, this is what's on the line, no messing about, just getting about them and get the job done quickly down there. And what's going on at the moment with you mentioned earlier on about Brendan and so on, like, I think he relishes this spot that he's in right now. There's wee comments that he's made along the way, particularly recently. He's been getting a bit more, talking about things like, we'll write our story. I think, he's determined, so I think he'll be open to changing up some of his strategy. I think, I know it's been criticised along the way. A few fans saying this and that. I've been critical as well. I think the football at times has regressed massively from the way it started, and then it's just gradually went down. December especially was a crucial month in the end with how much we fell off. But I think now with what's on the line, and I don't think he likes what's going on with the media narrative, and I think he'll take great satisfaction in proving many people wrong, because a lot of people had him written off. A lot of people in the media saying this Clement, he's a real deal. I think Mr. Keevans on Super Scoreboard said something to the effect of, this is a real challenge now for Celtic, really bigging them up. So I think Brendan Rodgers relishes being in these types of positions. And I think over the next 5 games or so, I think he'll show that with the way he sets out the team and how he approaches them. Because I think it'll give him, out of all the stuff that he's done at Celtic in his previous reign, I think this, if he pulls this off, I called it a few weeks ago. I said it was an improbable double, but it's not an impossible double. If he does pull it off, I think he might even rank this higher an achievement than the Invincible Treble from his own point of view, because the Invincible Treble season, one of my favourite seasons as a fan, going to the games, unbelievable. You can say what you want about the opposition and so on, and yeah, I know that Rangers team were pretty turgid, but he only beat was put in front of you. But I think obviously they never laid a glove on us, really. Nobody did that season. But see the way things have went this season, I think if he manages to pull this off, I genuinely think he will, from his own point of view, see it as I've done well there, essentially. Pat himself on the back. Wouldn't be like Brendan to pat himself on the back. I'm sure he's prone to it, but I think he will rank that one very, very high, and rightfully so, because yeah, times this season said improbable, but not impossible. But hey, after those results at the weekend, it's getting a little bit more likely now. The percentages just went up a wee bit more in our favour.
I'm glad you mentioned the Invincible season, because if you remember back to that season, that was the season I'm sure Warburton was being touted as the next England manager. So
Adrian Durham from TalkSport said it in his newspaper article. That's right, he did.
So it's not as if Brendan isn't used to this narrative in some ways, but I do take your point. I think this year is very much a question of, if you remember that infamous line he came out with when we drew Rangers in the Scottish Cup in his first spell, be careful what you wish for.
Yep.
And very much the line he's using behind the scenes in terms of how he's feeling about the media narrative this season. It feels like everything he's touched has turned to shit, and everything Clement's touch has turned to gold, and that's not really been the case when you actually look at it in a bit more detail. I completely accept the football hasn't been anywhere near the standard of Ange Postecoglou for most of the season. There's only been spells in games really where we've looked anywhere close to those sorts of levels. However, that all being said, he's still on course for an extremely high points total. Win or lose the league, he's probably going to get himself to around 90, perhaps even over 90 points this season. He's more than likely going to be succeeding points totals that he actually got in his first time around as well. So whilst the football might not have been as entertaining as we've used to been seeing with Brendan the first time around, or indeed under Ange Postecoglou over the past couple of years, one thing that has remained constant is that the results have still been there. The interesting thing, I think, post-split, as we look at it, and the reason Rangers are back in the situation they find themselves in is absolutely nothing to do with how the derbies have played in. It's actually all to do with the games against the other teams. And if we were to go back and you point out December is probably the reason why we are where we are and this league isn't done. And I'll tell you why, because 1 week in December, we suffer our first league defeat of the season. We go to Kilmarnock and we lose. The following week, we then play Hearts at home, and we also lose. Now, there is a possibility, and football can write some interesting stories as you go along. There is a very distinct possibility Celtic could end up in a situation where they play Kilmarnock away and Hearts at home in back-to-back games again at the end of the season here, and have the chance to put right those wrongs, and are going to have to put right those wrongs if they want to finish the season as champions. They have an opportunity at redemption for allowing Rangers back in those games, because I think, Phil, for a lot of people, they'll turn around and they'll say the derby will take care of itself, and they're probably right. The derbies are always a little bit different. Your players are always going to be up for games of that magnitude. Celtic's record at Celtic Park in these derbies is extremely good. It gives you a lot of confidence going into these games. I think I've read a stat. I don't think we've actually lost a derby at Celtic Park in the post-split fixtures ever. We've only lost once, maybe. I think under Martin O'Neill, I think maybe once, but it certainly doesn't happen often that we lose the derby matches in the post-split when it's at Celtic Park. Again, that breeds a bit of confidence there, as well as to where we're actually going. When you're looking at the fixtures coming up, now we don't know what the order is going to be, because the SPFL decided they want to wait till Thursday until they know what's going on at the top of the table. But when you look at the games left, we know, and I've got it written exactly the same as you, to be honest, as how I think we'll get our fixtures handed to us, which is Dundee, Hearts and Rangers at home, and Kilmarnock and St Mirren away. Which of those fixtures do you feel presents the most jeopardy there to Celtic in their pursuit of this title race, and the assumption that Rangers are able to keep pace with us?
Ironically, it's not the Rangers fixture. I was saying that on Friday night. I felt like all the games we've played against them this season, other than the second half at Ibrox last week, we've been the better team. I think the first game of the season, Rangers had a decent opening spell. They obviously had a goal that get chopped off by VAR, but then after we scored just before half time, I felt we controlled it really well. It was quite a comfortable 1-0 in the end. The game at the New Year, it was 2-0 going into the last few minutes, and they got it back to 2-1, and it was a wee bit sticky for the last the 10 minutes of stoppage time or something that they played. But ultimately, that game could have been whatever we wanted it to be that day. We were that dominant. And then the last week, first half was ridiculous against them at Ibrox, just outside that. So the Rangers games don't bother us. I think when people are saying they'll take care of themselves, I can understand the mentality there. The one that's obviously standing out like a sore thumb is Kilmarnock. And again, it's not even just what's happened this season. Brendan Rodgers in his previous spell as well had a bit of a poor record at Kilmarnock with some sticky results. There's Steve Clarke's Kilmarnock, which were notorious for taking points off us and off Rangers as well at the same time. But yeah, it seems like Brendan Rodgers' style and plastic pitches aren't a match made in heaven, to say the least. Hearts at home can be a bit of a worry as well, because let's be honest, there's a few people within their ranks who would love to be that the Terry Butcher on Helicopter Sunday, Stevie Naismith. Oh, I'm sure he would love to be that guy, because I think we will get Hearts at Celtic Park on the last day. That's what I think we'll play. I think we'll get the home game on the last day. I think we'll start with away, play Rangers in the second one, then it'll be like Dundee. So maybe Kilmarnock away, Rangers at home, Dundee at home. The second to last game's a midweek game. I know that. So that'll be St Mirren, I reckon. And then I think we'll get Hearts on the last day of the season at Celtic Park. And if it's still on the line going into the last day, they're a dangerous team. They beat us at Celtic Park already. They'll probably be comfortably finishing third at that point. But again, these are the dangerous ties, and they've got people within their ranks who would definitely love to spoil the party. So that one. I feel like the Kilmarnock one is, as much as people are going to look at that one, I think we'll go down there, and I think we'll get it done this time. But if it goes down to the very last game, if it's still on the line, that one could be a bit of a sticky one. But ultimately, we should have more than enough to beat these teams. I know we've said that plenty of times this season. You look at the squad side by side, it's like Celtic should, and especially what's on the line. It baffles me if Brendan has to do any sort of inspiring team talks at this stage, when you just need to point at the league table, just be like, that's all we've got to pin that up on the dressing room wall and just point at it before the game. The players know it's on the line, so you just like to fight that we're going both the way. But I think we'll have Hearts on the last day, and if it's still on the line there, it's going to be a nervy one going to Celtic Park that day, I'll tell you. But hopefully we've got it won by that point.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is going to boil down. Mark away and Rangers at home are probably the ones you're looking at, and Rangers at home I think does take care of itself. I think we hopefully shouldn't be losing that. Fingers crossed anyway that we are able to come through that, because I don't think Rangers have shown in the games against us this season that they have had our number yet. And hopefully that continues into the final fixture. They do seem as if they are riding a wave of downward momentum at the moment, and they're not going to have much chance to really turn that around before they play us. So again, I always think form's a big thing going into these games. I know a lot of people feel it goes out the window, but I do think there is something to be said in the team that has the most confidence going in, which to me is going to be Celtic, unless we end up playing on the second round of fixtures and we drop points in the first round of games. And we go into that in a very good place mentally and psychologically. And truth be told, we've got the better players, we'll be fuming with ourselves deep down, I think, if we do end up on the wrong side of this come the end of the season, because it will go down as a huge missed opportunity with some of the takeaways from the season when the dust has settled. If it doesn't end up falling our way, there'll be a lot of reflection to go on as to where it's gone wrong. And the most obvious one will be actually looking at ourselves a lot as to what's happened there. Obviously, looking at the games coming up, we know now Maeda is unfortunately going to be ruled out, which I think is probably the biggest blows actually in the Rangers game for that, because I think he just neutralised Tavernier so much in a match like this, especially now with the way it's all setting up, that's going to be a must-win for Rangers, and Tavernier has caused us a lot of problems on that side when he goes forward. He is definitely one of their biggest threats to us if things aren't to go our way on that day. Maeda, for me, I know a lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him. He is one of those Marmite type figures where you just never know exactly what you're going to get from him on a game-to-game basis. But for me, there's absolutely no question that when it comes to the Rangers games, Maeda has probably been in our top 3 performers in every single one pretty much that he's ever played in. He's actually that good in those games with what he brings to the team, and he scores in them fairly regularly, as well. Looking away from the Rangers games, I'm not sure how big a loss or otherwise he is, and I'm sure there'll be strong opinions from both sides of that argument as to whether or not it's a hindrance not having him, or perhaps an assistance in the sense that you've got somebody like a Kuhn, a Yang, or a Forrest potentially going in there. For the sake of this argument, Phil, with Maeda not being available there, how big of an impact do you think that will be? And who do you think Brendan Rodgers should be turning to at this point to hang his hat on? Because I know who I would look at on this. And he's the man that has been there and got over the line so many times before. And unbelievably, he is one of my bestest pals on Sunday. So I've got to stay true to James Forrest. I think James Forrest, as much as I can't believe I'm saying this, and I never expected to be saying this a few months ago, for me, James Forrest should be the one who gets the nod when Maeda isn't fit. I don't know what you think or who you would rather have in there, but what are your kind of thoughts on all of that?
There's something very poetic about the fact you waited till about 15 minutes to go on the Monday Club to mention James Forrest. That's it, came full circle, because this is that time of the show where we would usually mention James Forrest a lot because he's always a go-to answer on certain death. But the funny thing was on Saturday with the way the performance was going, but it was still, there was points where I was like, I wanted to see James Forrest on. It's mad that we're in 2024 and genuinely we're looking at it, and it shouldn't be an answer. And I do think his race is run. When the summer comes, we should definitely thank him, send him on his way, whatever. But yeah, there was points at the weekend there where you're like, Forrest, he could be an option here because they couldn't get into the game. Yang didn't really get into the game, but our wingers, it's been a sort of microcosm of our wingers' performance this season. Jono, they've been so up and down. At times we play wingers and you're like, why are we even playing them? Because we don't do anything with them. We play it out wide, then we play it back the way and it just goes along the back line and goes out to the other winger and then comes back again in a horseshoe. And it's so frustrating to watch. But right now, if I had to choose, I wouldn't go for Forrest. I think the guy that has to come back in and find the form that he had at the early part of the season is Lewis Palmer, who also came back at the weekend, back from injury. He's the guy for me right now because Yang, I see his name get mentioned in the chat a wee bit. He's still too raw, too hot and cold. He's had a few decent performances at times this season, but for me, I still think there's, especially what's on the line right now, I think Palmer has shown at points this season, especially early on. The Champions League performances, I think he put in some good shifts, and he was obviously so desperately unlucky against Lazio. That moment was, that goal getting disallowed was worse than them scoring a 94th minute winner. That was even more of a gut punch, was the hysteria of scoring that goal only to have it taken away. But his goal against Atletico in the next fixture was a fantastic finish, and I felt he put in some decent performances in the first half of the season, but he's been so hot and cold, just like most of our wingers. But I feel like he is the guy that's got that bit of quality in him out of what's available right now. Say Maeda, I'm one of those ones that does fall on the, I like him. I don't love him, but I like him. I see what he brings to the team. I see similarities to Samaras in a way where he's so unpredictable. When he's on it, defenders don't know how to deal with him. Samaras was very much a player that Samaras didn't know what he was going to do next. I feel like Dyson Maeda doesn't know what he's going to do next, which sometimes benefits him, sometimes it doesn't. He is chaos. I think initially when in the early stages of Bhoycie Bus, I think Russell coined the chaos Giakoumakis and danger Maeda. And Maeda definitely is dangerous at times with some of the stuff that he does. But yeah, he is going to be a loss, I think, regardless of taking the Rangers game out of the equation, because he is always a problem against them with what he does to Tavernier. But yeah, I think right now we need all the options available. Sadly, a few of them, falling the wayside injured. But again, we've got just enough. And when it comes to the wingers, I would lean towards Lewis Palmer, but I understand where you're coming from on James Forrest. I don't think he's the worst hand right now. He's shown in the cameos that he's had recently he's still got just something left in the tank, just a little bit of petrol left in the tank, just to offer us something. But ultimately, in the summer, this should be the end for James Forrest. It really should.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. His time, I think, was up probably a couple of years back, if we're being honest. But he still keeps coming back and producing moments. And he's had some moments again this season off the bench where he has looked fairly tidy, and when defences are beginning to tire, I do think he still offers us something going forward that the others don't. Especially defensively in certain games, we might well need to look at him. I think Rangers, I think he could have a pivotal role to play depending on how that game goes as the match wears on, whether he starts or whether he comes off the bench. I think he is somebody that Brendan will look to in the next few games, because he knows with somebody like a James Forrest, it is someone that has experienced and been over the course so many times before, and he's one of Brendan's boys, really. Brendan was one of the guys who, if you remember all the way back, everyone thought James Forrest was for his way out. The first time Brendan came in, everyone thought James Forrest was going to be the first ones to exit on Brendan's arrival. And then it turned out to be the best years of James Forrest's career over the next few years under Brendan in that spell. And I think Brendan might still have that little soft touch for him and still believe he has something left to give. And it would be some way for him to sign off if he to end up becoming an integral part in us getting over the line and winning the league title this year. Whether or not he starts all the games, I don't think he will. I think he's probably going to be more of an impact sort of sub, but I would certainly have him ahead of Yang every day of the week. At the minute, I feel like Yang, as you rightly pointed, is just a bit too raw. I feel like there's just too much risk putting him in at the minute, and I feel like after the sort of cop-out at Ibrox where he's made a total mess by letting the guy cut back in and then not tracking him, I think has to count against him, unfortunately, till the end of the season. And then you reassess where you're at with him into the next year. But these games are too important to be risking somebody like Yang for me in the league. However, with that all being said, there is now a break coming up in league football for us anyway. I know we've talked about Rangers playing at Dens or indeed McDiarmid Park during the week. For Celtic, we are next in action on Saturday at Hampden. We continue our defence of the Scottish Cup semi-final against Aberdeen, probably the best draw we could have hoped for at this stage, given where Aberdeen are as a club at the moment. They are still managerless as well, so that's all looking fairly positive. When you're looking at where we are now with the league, Phil, I actually wonder if this time, and I sometimes think the Cup can get in the way of a good league title run-in. I actually think this time around it might have came at a good time for Celtic, with Rangers having now given over the initiative, regardless of what happens midweek. Celtic are going into this Cup semi-final weekend very much in the driver's seat now to secure the league title, and Rangers are going to have to stew on that for a little while longer before they'll actually have a chance to do something extremely meaningful about it. Obviously, with the Cup, it's probably almost been forgotten about, I think, in some ways, because of how close this league title race has been, which is a bit unbelievable, really, because generally speaking, at this point of the season, we are chasing down trebles in recent years, and that's what we've been used to be doing. And there hasn't really been a lot of talk about a league and cup double whatsoever that I've really heard at all. It's all been about the league. How important is the Scottish Cup this year, given how close the league title race is? And do you think that the Cup has came at a good time for Celtic having it this weekend to make Rangers have to think a little bit longer on what went wrong for them in terms of handing the initiative back over to us in the title race?
Initially, my thoughts were, when I saw the fixtures coming up, was the Cup one. I was like, this has been typical, because there's been so many moments this season where we've had a decent result, something's went our way, then there's an international break, or there's a cup game, Scottish Cup, League Cup. Well, our League Cup for them didn't last very long, did it? Let's be honest, we were out pretty quickly. But in terms of international breaks, they kept coming up. So after that result of the weekend, if my first thought was, oh God, Scottish Cup, I really want to just keep going with the league right now. But you're right in what you say. They're going to have to stew on this for a while. And then it depends what happens as well in this rearranged game that's coming up. It could get even worse for them. And then who knows what mentality they would go in with at the weekend when they're playing Hearts. Although, again, I just take it that they'll probably win. But the Scottish Cup, if it goes the way I think it's going to go, where the final is going to be Celtic Rangers, well, we're in a position where it's going to be massive this season, because if Celtic do win the league, which obviously we think will happen now, it seems to be the consensus that we're in the driving seat, we'll get it done. And obviously we're all hoping that's going to happen. We're going to go into that final with Rangers where one team's going to finish the season with 2 trophies. And I know the 2 cups, winning the league is the most important one, but it always looks to be a bit nicer when you've got another cup to go alongside it. And as Spell the Glove has added, Marc Cairney said this a few times, Scottish Cup is our cup. It's the one that I associate with Celtic more than anything. You know, we've won it more times than anybody. It's the brings down the curtain on the season. You know, it's one you associate. Hopefully a nice sunny day in May. What a way to wrap up the season if we do it. So it's going to be massive in this season in particular, because you're heading towards a shootout between Celtic and Rangers where we're going to be playing each other, and it could be a spot where one team's going to walk away with 2 trophies for the season. Now, if you are concerned about records and overall records and certain teams that chop about most successful club in the world and count all their trophies, if you are into all of that, I believe at the start of the season, we were 2 trophies behind them in the overall trophy count. So most fans were saying, well, if we win the treble this season, we'll go ahead of them. But now it's the case, well, they did win the League Cup, which pushes them 1 further ahead. But then if we win the 2, that would bring us back to level, I believe. So if you are into all that, and there are fans on the other side of the city that are into that, and I think they are worried about that happening. I said to my dad a few years ago, by the time this decade ends, when we get to the 31st of December 2029, Celtic will have far and away surpassed their overall trophy haul, old Rangers and new Rangers, however you want to look at it. I think, well, the way that we scoop up trophies and the ratio to them, we'll definitely pass them. So this season, we were in a position where we could pass them by winning the treble. And I think that frustrated a lot of fans, where it was like, we blew it right away, losing to Kilmarnock. But now we're in a position, I believe, where we can draw level in the overall trophy haul. But I suppose it depends what trophies they count, because there's all controversy over World War II trophies and all that stuff. Who knows? Titles that were shared with Dumbarton. I'm pretty sure that when the day comes that we do pass their trophy, suddenly they'll start saying, but we've won the lower leagues. We've won the Petrofac Cup and all that stuff. That will all start getting included as well. But yeah, if you are into all of that, then yeah, that's obviously on the line in the next year or 2. But this season, first and foremost, let's worry about that. Yeah, we're greedy football fans. We're all greedy, aren't we, Jono? So win the league, get a Scottish Cup alongside it. I wouldn't say no to that.
No, definitely not. And obviously you're looking at it from the positive side of things. Since Mark's not with us, I'll bring the doom and gloom to it just for a moment. If the unthinkable was to happen and we were to lose the league, that cup final all of a sudden becomes a hell of a lot more important if it plays out the way you think the semis will, because then the unthinkable could happen and Rangers could somehow be on course for a treble, which just doesn't seem like that would be anywhere near proportionate for what they've played and put into this season. That Celtic walk away with nothing and Rangers walk away with everything. But it is still, an option that is on the table at this moment in time. It is something we need to be wary of. And I think we'll take the Scottish Cup extremely seriously. Brendan Rodgers is certainly eyeing it up, because I think for him, winning the league is going to be extremely sweet, given how the narrative has been, and he's going to be ended up talking about the story and how the story has all changed and shifted, and Celtic have written their own story. But I think deep down he wants them both. He is a serial winner, unlike those people across the city that aren't used to being in these sort of situations very often. And Brendan Rodgers will look at it and think, to really prove the point, he needs to win the Scottish Cup along with the league, because he already knows what the story will be. Let's say Celtic win the league, Phil, and they do get over the line now, as many expect them to, but then they lose the cup final to Rangers. It is then a narrative in the summer will not be about Celtic finding a way to win that league championship. It will be all about how Rangers have managed to win 2 cups to Celtic's league title. It'll be about how Rangers finished the season on a high by beating Brendan Rodgers and proving they could do it if these games play out the way we expect them to in the league. And then it'll be all about Rangers are now right up Celtic's backside and they're about to surpass. And you can see it now. We all know what the narrative would be there. And I think Brendan Rodgers will be desperate to stamp that completely out. And that is why he'll look at the Cup as being just as significant, or maybe not quite just as significant, but certainly not massively less significant than the league title. He is going to be looking at that as something he feels he needs to win to really change the narrative, which I feel is the sort of mindset and what he's telling the players. That's kind of almost his slogan this year, is change the narrative. And to do that, he needs to win both pieces of silverware that are left for us. But for me, I mean, I'm fairly confident we get past Aberdeen. I'm assuming you'll be kind of similar. You know, it's the best fixture we could have gotten. As I say, and Aberdeen are probably in a place where it's the last meaningful game they're going to play this season, so we'll throw everything at it. But are you quite confident at the weekend that we'll get over the line?
Yeah, I think so. It's the best draw we could add. Their manager is just now such a strange situation. What happened to Warnock and all that, but yeah, weird. But we could ask for a better draw for it. And regarding the, we're talking about the narrative and so on. We've been there before. I can point to an example. 2002. Alex McLeish took over Rangers halfway through the season. They beat us in the League Cup semi and beat us in the Scottish Cup final. We won the league that season, but again, all the narrative was how Alex McLeish has got Martin O'Neill's number and so on. So it's going to be massively important. I know a lot of Celtic fans may go, at the end of the day, the league was the most important thing, but hey, I remember how horrible that felt when Lovenkrands scored that last-minute winner that day. It didn't, it mattered to me that day. It mattered to many of us. And any fan thinking about that moment now will be like, fuck, that was a terrible moment. So we don't want a scenario like that. So yeah, we need to get those two trophies on board. And hey, Brendan, obviously obviously there's a joke in the Christmas advert there where they put his book back on the shelf. He needs a new book written, essentially. Well, that's fine. This can be his story this season. That could be his new autobiography, talking about and put that on sale in the superstore. And they can replace all those old copies they had to pull out in the Christmas ad. Yeah, it would make a good story this season if we do come back from nowhere, essentially. Because, yeah, a few months ago, most fans were like, we've blown this, we've thrown this away. But no, see, it's now on. It's on the table. Just go and grab it, boys. This is it.
This is indeed it. It'll be interesting to see exactly how the story plays out over the week. I'm sure we will be, with us on the bus throughout the weeks to come to kind of capture the story and hopefully be enjoying how it plays out, as well. I'm not entirely sure what we've got coming up this week. I know we'll have a Thursday forum, I'm sure. The Friday feeling, I'm guessing, will be back. Phil, this
yes,
Friday.
Indeed. Yep.
The Aberdeen game will obviously have PMP with Russell and Terry to follow on Saturday at some point after the Cup game, and then the Sunday Blether as well as another regular show that we have on a Sunday morning. So there's plenty of content to keep an eye out for on the bus over the next few weeks. But we are now finished up for today. Enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy the fact that the narrative has changed, and let's find out just who will be the moral winners come Wednesday night. See you later.
See you, folks.